Look at that little baby. Good Lord, I've never seen something so cute.
Amid the sun-drenched plains of Texas, where the fields stretch endlessly to the horizon, and the wind carries the scent of dry hay and red earth, there lies a quiet little ranch nestled in a valley. It's the home of Tanya Tucker, the country music icon who has won 2 Grammy Awards, released over 25 albums, and earned her place in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Fame came early, pulling Tanya into a whirlwind of parties, hard liquor, and sleepless nights that often spun out of control. There were times when she checked herself into rehab, trying to escape the chaos within. And there were days when she vanished completely from the stage, cutting ties with friends, living so privately that many believed she had walked away from music forever. Now, at 67 years old, Tanya has left the city behind and returned to her ranch in Austin. No one could have imagined that the woman who once held a fortune of over $60 million would one day choose such a quiet, peaceful life. Are you curious to see what Tanya Tucker's life looks like today? And what could have led a woman once surrounded by lights and scandals to embrace such simplicity on her ranch? The answers await you in the video ahead. Before she became the rebel child of Nashville, Tanya Tucker was just a little blonde girl from Texas, born amid the wind, sun, and red dust, where music and motor oil seemed to mix in the air. She came into the world in 1958 in a small house in Seminole, where her father, Bo Tucker, worked as a mechanic and played the guitar after long shifts. In Texas, every road leads to a song, he used to say. Her mother, Juanita, believed her youngest child carried something extraordinary within her, a voice so husky, deep, and sorrowful it could give grown men chills. During the 1,960 seconds, the Tucker family's pickup truck never seemed to stop rolling from Texas to Arizona, then on to Utah and Nevada. Each move meant leaving behind a few friends and a few old windows, but Tanya never forgot the guitar her father gave her at age 8. "You've got 2 problems," her father once told her. "1, you're a girl. 2, you're only 9. So you'll have to sing with twice the feeling before anyone believes you." The words, half joke and half truth, became Tanya Tucker's lifelong compass, a reminder that she was born to challenge every boundary set before her. At 10, the family settled in Henderson, Nevada, a town glowing with neon bars and thick with the smell of beer and cigarette smoke. There, the tiny girl took the stage for the first time, singing "You Ain't Woman Enough" to Take My Man by Loretta Lynn. Her voice trembled, yet it carried a smoky fire beneath the ash, silencing the entire room. No one could understand how a child could sing about betrayal as though she had lived it herself. But Tanya wasn't pretending she felt it. She lived inside every word, as if music were the only thing keeping her from falling into some invisible emptiness. From an amateur recording, destiny came knocking. Legendary Columbia Records producer Billy Sherrill happened to hear that voice and froze in his tracks. "I didn't know who that little girl was," he later recalled, "but that voice made me feel like I'd wasted my entire life." In 1972, at just 13 years old, Tanya arrived in Nashville. Inside the cold studio, her feet dangled above the floor, and the microphone loomed larger than her face. When Delta Dawn began to play, the entire city seemed to hold its breath. It was a song about a mad woman waiting for her lover's return, yet sung by a child. Her voice, innocent yet aching with sorrow, made people believe she truly understood that pain, even though she had never known love herself. The record label hid her real age, afraid that audiences wouldn't believe a child could sing with the grief of a lifetime. When the song hit the radio, Nashville was stunned. A young girl had just given voice to America's loneliness and made millions weep. Delta Dawn became a phenomenon. Tanya Tucker became the youngest country star in history. People asked, How can a child sing like someone who's lived it all? No one had an answer. Perhaps life had written that melody into her blood long before she ever sang it. Throughout the 1,970 seconds, the name Tanya Tucker blazed like a neon sign in the Nashville sky. At just 16, she had sold millions of records and shared the stage with Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, and Johnny Cash, legends she had once only heard through a crackling radio. They looked at her with both admiration and doubt. This fiery-eyed blonde girl was doing something Nashville had never seen before. But what truly captivated audiences wasn't just her voice, it was the way she lived on stage. While other female singers hid behind long dresses and polite smiles, Tanya stormed in wearing tight jeans, leather boots, and sleeveless tops, her gaze daring the world to challenge her. She sang about love, betrayal, loneliness, and sin subjects far too adult for a teenage girl. Yet every time she opened her mouth, the audience knew this wasn't performance. It was survival. One autumn night in 1975, at the Grand Ole Opry, 17-year-old Tanya stepped into a sea of light. She sang, and the entire hall fell silent. Only the sound of camera shutters clicked like crickets in the dark. Rolling Stone wrote, "She looked more like a wild rock child than a country angel." She became the youngest female artist ever to appear on the magazine's cover. From that moment on, America no longer called her the little country girl. They called her a phenomenon. But could an 18-year-old girl stop when all of Nashville already lay at her feet? Or would she take the next step into a world bolder, brighter, and infinitely more dangerous? The answer would be written in the next chapter of her life. When TNT was released in 1978, Nashville seemed to hold its breath once again. The album cover was an explosion of attitude. Tanya Tucker, in a red leather bodysuit, gripping a microphone like a weapon, eyes fierce and unflinching. Billboard called it the most shocking transformation in country music this decade. Tanya just smiled and said, "It's my declaration of independence." The music in TNT was unlike anything she had ever done before, thick with the scent of cigarette smoke, whiskey, and freedom. Country fused with rock and roll raw, hungry, and so daring that it made the conservatives step back. The album climbed into the top 20 on the Billboard 200, something almost unheard of for a pure country singer. It wasn't just a commercial success. It was a declaration. Tanya Tucker was no longer the girl singing about other people's pain. She was beginning to rewrite her own definition. As TNT exploded, so did Nashville. People magazine crowned her the wild child of country music. Half of America hailed her as a new feminist icon, a woman fearless enough to blur the lines between sweet and defiant, between country and rock. The other half despised her. Conservative radio stations banned her songs. Record executives called her a traitor, the problem child of Nashville. Variety wrote, "If Dolly Parton opened the door, Tanya Tucker kicked it off its hinges." And she truly did. She didn't knock. She kicked her way through, leaving behind the smoke, the electric guitars, and the stunned silence of an industry raised on steel strings and modest voices. Audiences were divided. Some loved her for her fire, others hated her for her defiance. But love her or loathe her, no one could look away. On stage, Tanya was a storm, brilliant, wild, untamed. Off stage, she was an enigma. In her 20s, she had it all: million-dollar contracts, mansions, luxury cars, and sold-out tours. Flashbulbs chased her every move, every man by her side. Every night she stumbled out of a Los Angeles nightclub, hair tousled, eyes heavy. One hand holding a cigarette, the other shielding her face from the glare. Tanya was both queen and prey. But behind all that light was a sound only she could hear: the hollow echo of lonely hotel rooms. In one rare interview, Tanya confessed, "Every night I'd go from standing ovations to silence in a motel room. I learned that loneliness can be louder than applause. That line would later become the truest definition of fame's price, especially when it comes too early. America was mesmerized by that voice. But no one realized that the very moment that made her a legend also opened the door to a darker spiral into fame, scandal, and the madness that was yet to come. Are you ready to step into the wildest chapter of her life? By the late 1970s, Nashville was shaken by an earthquake named Tanya Tucker and Glenn Campbell. The 20-year-old blonde dove headfirst into a relationship with a man nearly 2 decades. Her senior, a legend, an icon, a mountain few dared to climb. But Tanya had never known fear. They loved each other like 2 flames burning from the same match, brilliant, brief, and destined to leave scars that would never fade. The whole city was intoxicated by them, then horrified by the fights, the drunken nights, even the hotel brawls that followed. The tabloids called them the ultimate scandal couple, while Hollywood whispered passion and destruction in one body. For Tanya, it wasn't just a romance, it was the moment she lost her center. Too young to understand that love doesn't always save you, she let it burn away the last trace of innocence she had left. When the relationship ended in 1981, Tanya was exhausted physically, emotionally, spiritually. She spiraled out of the spotlight, turning to alcohol, cigarettes, and the pills that dulled her thoughts. It was anesthesia for the soul, she once said. In a few rare interviews, Tanya admitted she had collapsed backstage more than once before a show. Music was the only shelter I had left. When The Return of Tanya Tucker premiered in 2022, audiences finally saw never-before-seen footage, her trembling hands gripping the microphone, her whiskey-rough voice cracking as she slowly sang her old songs again. A woman who had hit rock bottom, standing amid the ashes just to prove that her voice still lived. By 2023, even as she battled chronic bronchitis and relied on oxygen daily, Tanya refused to give up smoking, a habit she had carried for half a century. The press called her reckless, but those who knew her best understood. It wasn't carelessness. It was Tanya, holding on to the one small thing that still made her feel alive, like a fragile flame flickering in the dark. In the 1,980 seconds, Tanya vanished from Nashville like a storm dissolving after a night of thunder. Headlines screamed across tabloids, "The Golden Girl disappears," "Country Queen on the brink of bankruptcy." But the truth was far simpler. A young woman lost between 2 shores, the fame she once knew and the self she had yet to find. She lived quietly between California and Tennessee, sometimes returning to Texas, where the scent of motor oil still lingered from her childhood. By day, Tanya stayed inside her shuttered apartment. By night, she drifted through bars where no one remembered her name. The money faded, the friends disappeared. Only music remained. Once her wings, now an invisible shackle. Then, in 1986, as if fate decided to test her, Tanya stepped back into the studio. Her voice was no longer smooth. It was scarred, smoky, weighted with the sorrow of someone who had fallen hard. "One Love at a Time" echoed not as the call of a 17-year-old girl, but as the confession of a 30-year-old woman. 2 years later, If It Don't Come Easy climbed into the Billboard Country Top 10, signaling a quiet comeback. This time, the light wasn't dazzling, but it was steady. Tanya no longer sang to conquer an audience. She was learning how to make peace with herself. Through the 1,980 seconds and 1,990 seconds, the press still refused to let go. Every romance was dissected, every stumble magnified. She had 3 children with 3 different men, yet never married any of them. In a still conservative America, that was deemed a moral provocation. Even Vice President Al Gore publicly criticized her on television. When reporters asked about it, Tanya answered simply, "I don't need a ring to prove I know how to love." That line cut through judgment and stood as the boldest declaration of a woman who had lost everything, yet still held on to her right to be herself. Then, in 2008, Tanya Tucker's name filled the tabloids once more, this time not for her music, but for a drastically altered face after a failed cosmetic surgery. The public wasn't kind. They mocked her. Tanya stayed silent. In an interview later, she quietly admitted, "When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back." Yet through every blow, Tanya Tucker endured not perfect, but real. What she lived through mirrored the darker side of show business, where young women are worshipped for shining and condemned for stumbling. In her 60s, Tanya still sang, still stood on stage, her voice raspier, her breath shorter, her eyes sadder than before. But every time she sang, the audience rose to their feet, not just for the music, but because they heard an entire lifetime in her voice. After nearly half a century under the spotlight, it seemed that husky voice might finally fade into quiet retirement until 2019, when Tanya Tucker stunned Nashville once again. Her return was humble, unadvertised, wrapped in simplicity. An album titled While I'm Livin'. Produced by Brandi Carlile and Shooter Jennings, the project was more than just music. It was a conversation between past and present, between a fallen legend and the younger generation that revered her. In every song, especially Bring My Flowers, now listeners could hear the sigh of time and the fragile faith of forgiveness. The album accomplished what few believed possible. It brought Tanya Tucker back to the top after decades of silence. In 2020, she won 2 Grammy Awards, Best Country Album for While I'm Livin' and Best Country Song for Bring My Flowers Now. As she stepped onto the stage to accept her trophies, her voice trembled, but her eyes shone bright. "I've waited 47 years for this moment." That moment was more than just a reward for an album. It was a long overdue recognition of an entire lifetime of devotion. A gentle reply from time itself to the woman once abandoned by Nashville. 2 years later, in 2022, that story of rebirth found its way to the big screen in the Sony Pictures Classics documentary, The Return of Tanya Tucker. Premiering at SXSW, the film was hailed as a love letter to resilience. Blending archival footage from the 1,970 seconds with behind-the-scenes moments of her recording sessions with Brandi Carlile, viewers saw a Tanya Tucker so real it hurt, not the rebellious girl anymore, but a woman learning to forgive herself. The film revealed something profound. Sometimes the greatest thing an artist can do isn't to release another hit, but to stand up again, to tell the story of their own fall and survival. By 2023, Nashville finally carved her name into the Country Music Hall of Fame, beside legends like Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn. Tanya became one of the youngest women ever to receive that honor, something she once believed would never happen. During the ceremony, she didn't cry. She simply smiled and said, "I used to think I'd been left behind, but maybe God just wanted me to take the long way around to learn gratitude." Then she sang Delta Dawn, the song that started it all when she was only 13. Her voice now rougher, slower, but warm and filled with pride. One might have thought that was the final chapter, but in 2024, Tanya once again surprised her fans with the release of Sweet Western Sound, continuing her partnership with Brandi Carlile. If While I'm Livin' was a confession, Sweet Western Sound was acceptance. The music carried the spirit of the western wind, sun-soaked, dusty, and touched with the quiet loneliness of someone who has lost much, yet still believes in beauty. Tanya didn't try to reinvent herself. She simply sang as she was, honest, simple, and profound. Critics called it the sound of a soul at peace. Carlile described Sweet Western Sound as the final chapter of a journey where two generations meet through music. And indeed, at over 60, Tanya Tucker was no longer just singing for her audience. She was singing for everyone like her, those who have fallen but still wish to live one more time. From 2019 onward, Tanya didn't merely return, she redefined what a comeback means. Not through fame, but through courage. Not through glamour, but through truth. She had nothing left to prove, only the certainty that music still flowed through her veins, just as it did on the very first day. Now, as the stage lights have softened, where does she live? And what brings peace to the woman who once conquered all of Nashville? Let's step beyond the wooden gates of her Austin ranch, the place where she's found happiness in her own quiet way. The Austin Ranch, which Tanya Tucker purchased in 2018, is more than a retreat. It's a small paradise for the abandoned and forgotten. Here, horses, chickens, dogs, cats, and even stray wild animals all have a place to belong. Tanya calls them family, not pets. She bought the ranch in 2018 for just over $1 million, not to show off, but to have a place that was truly hers. The main house sits on open land, surrounded by weathered wooden fences and horse stables aged by sun and time. Each morning, she wakes before sunrise, slips on her old rubber boots, coffee steaming in hand, and walks slowly through the dew-covered fields to check each stall, each nesting box, each small bird cage. She often jokes, "I'm a farmer," before I've even had my first sip of coffee. The sounds of her brushing feathers, horses' hooves tapping on wood, and the creak of barn doors blend together into a gentle symphony one no stage could ever reproduce. On that ranch, Tanya has built what she calls her own small kingdom of peace. She lovingly refers to it as heaven for the lost ones, a sanctuary for all abandoned souls. Horses, chickens, dogs, cats, and even injured wild creatures all find refuge there. She once joked to her longtime partner, Craig Dillingham. Craig says the number of animals here is probably catching up to the number of records I've sold. But I told him, they're what keep my feet on the ground. And it's true. Amid the Texas pastures, Tanya calls the animals around her family, not pets. Each one has a name, a personality, and is treated with a rare tenderness, the kind of love that asks for nothing and expects nothing in return. On social media, fans often see her sharing candid snapshots, hugging a horse, laughing beside a puppy, or sitting alone on her wooden porch with a small glass of wine, watching the crimson sunset melt across the Texas fields. Beneath every post, thousands of comments call her Mother of the Animals, and perhaps that's the most genuine title Tanya Tucker has ever had. After a lifetime of stumbles and storms, she has found gentleness in the only creatures that never judge her. Her partner Craig Dillingham half-jokingly says, "Tanya's herd is so big, it scares me sometimes." But even he understands that this is how she keeps her soul steady. This ranch helps her breathe, Craig once said in an interview. And he was right. The place is her private oasis, where the woman who once stood in the whirlwind of fame now needs nothing more than a porch roof, a few animals, and the simple peace of breathing freely. Still, don't mistake her quiet life for retirement. Though Tanya spends most of her time on the ranch tending to horses, writing songs, and soaking in the calm rhythm of country life, the artist's fire inside her never went out. Occasionally, she still takes the stage at special tribute shows or charity concerts. And each time the spotlight finds her, that husky, soul-worn voice fills the room, reminding everyone that Delta Dawn never grew old, and that somewhere in the Nashville twilight, that Texas girl still sings. Today, as the wind whispers through the trees, Tanya Tucker is no longer Nashville's golden girl. She is a woman who has lived through it all, light and scandal, love and loss, and chosen to end her journey in stillness, where every morning begins with the crow of a rooster, and every evening closes with the warm breath of animals resting by her porch. There, in the heart of Texas nature, Tanya no longer seeks glory, she has found peace. Amid this quiet ranch life, the only trace of her old restless rhythm lies in her passion for cars. The one thing that still makes her feel in motion, even as the world around her slows down. In the barn out back, filled with the scent of old gasoline, red dust, and soft rays of sunlight piercing the tin roof, sits a peculiar collection of vehicles, full of character and memories. Not supercars, not Hollywood luxury. Tanya prefers things that bear the mark of time machines with breath, stories, and souls. The jewel of her collection is a 1956 Ford F-100. Its reddish-brown paint faded beautifully with age. Once a symbol of the 1952, this model is cherished for its Y-block V8 engine and rare step-side design, of which only a few originals remain today. Tanya calls it Old Faithful, her loyal companion through thousands of miles of touring. Once, when the truck broke down in the New Mexico desert, she didn't call for help. She popped the hood and fixed it with her bare hands. "If it still runs," she laughed, "then I can still keep going." Beside it sits a Harley-Davidson Road King, its glossy black paint and gleaming chrome frame glowing under the amber lights. This legendary touring bike was built for endless rides across the American highway. But Tanya's Harley is something special. A 1993 90th anniversary limited edition model with only about 1,500 units ever produced. While most collectors keep theirs locked away in private garages, Tanya rides hers down the Texas highways every morning, just as she says, to feel the wind screaming past my ears and know I'm still alive. At the back of the barn rests a faded silver tour bus, still marked with the old logo, Tanya Tucker Band. It's the same bus that carried her across Tennessee during her 1986 comeback tour after the darkest years of her life. The interior is worn, the seats cracked, the curtains torn, the floor scuffed, but Tanya refuses to change a thing. Under the driver's seat still lies an empty whiskey bottle, and on the wall, a handwritten scrawl reads, "We made it to Memphis, barely." These days, on quiet afternoons, Tanya often opens the barn doors and climbs onto the Harley's seat, not to start the engine, but just to sit there, her hands resting on the handlebars, eyes lost in the distance. "The sound of the engine," she once said, "feels more like the stage than anything else, loud, rough, and lonely." Next to her machines, Tanya keeps one thing that can never be replaced. Music, the very thing that once saved her from countless sleepless nights, and the only place where she still finds true peace. Inside her home, there's a small room lined with guitars, mandolins, and harmonicas. Some of them are so old their strings have rusted, yet she treasures them like sacred relics. Each has a name: Sweet Lizzie, Whiskey Girl, Old Glenn. Sometimes she plays old cassette tapes, listening to her 13-year-old self singing Delta Dawn in 1973, the voice that once mesmerized an entire nation. She smiles, then turns it off. No regret, just a quiet nod to her past. Beyond cars and music, Tanya nurtures a lesser-known passion, photographing the desert. Armed with an old film camera, she drives along Texas highways every spring, capturing abandoned barns, weathered power poles, and endless skies. Each photo, she says, is a song without music. People often think that celebrities live only for the spotlight. But for Tanya Tucker, after all the chaos, fame, and years of running, what she's truly sought was never the stage. It was this: a dusty road, an old truck, and the fleeting feeling of freedom in a single breath. Yet don't let that calm fool you. Behind the woman chasing quiet freedom lies an empire built on 5 decades of fame, artistry, and sheer willpower. Tanya Tucker no longer needs stage lights to prove her worth. Her simple life itself is the loudest testament to all she has achieved. By most estimates, Tanya's net worth now sits around $60 million, largely fueled by music royalties, a steady current flowing year after year, like the heartbeat of a lifelong career. With over 25 studio albums and hundreds of songs still played daily on country radio across America, her legacy endures. And every time Delta Dawn, Texas, When I Die, or Two Sparrows in a Hurricane drifts through a southern afternoon, Tanya still receives her share, enough to buy hay for the horses each week, she once joked. Beyond royalties, touring has always been the lifeblood of her fame. Though she no longer performs as relentlessly as before, Tanya still graces tribute nights and charity concerts, shows that often sell out within hours. Audiences don't just come to hear her gravelly, soulful voice. They come to witness a living chapter of country music history. Stepping on stage in her old leather jacket, her eyes still blazing with the same fire as decades ago. Her third source of income comes from film and television. The 2022 documentary, The Return of Tanya Tucker, produced by Brandi Carlile, not only generated significant revenue, but also reignited her reputation among younger audiences. After the film's release, her streaming numbers skyrocketed, and sponsorship and image rights offers poured in as if Nashville suddenly remembered that its legend had never really left. Tanya has also collaborated on smaller ventures, from perfume and wine labels to her own line of vintage-inspired country apparel. Quietly but shrewdly, she chooses her projects with care, never chasing trends, only authenticity. Above all, Tanya's true financial strength lies in real estate, what she once called land the sound of permanence. Unlike many stars of her era, she never splurged on supercars or glittering mansions, preferring to invest in the open lands she loved. Over her career, she has bought, sold, and restored numerous ranches across Tennessee, California, and Texas. In 2007, she made headlines by selling 500 acres in Arrington, Tennessee, earning over $11.5 million a deal. Financial analysts hailed as a masterstroke of intuition. Now, when Tanya watches the sun set over those familiar fields, she probably understands this better than ever. Music built her fame, but land and her resilience are what keep her standing strong to this day. But amid all those numbers, one question looms larger. What has Tanya Tucker done with her wealth to give back to the world? The answer lies just ahead. Tanya rarely talks about charity. No speeches, no photo ops, no grand donation ceremonies. She prefers quiet acts of kindness, silently supporting organizations that protect abused children, fund animal rescues, and aid aging Nashville musicians who once shared the stage with her but have since been forgotten by time. Within the music community, people often say that whenever someone falls on hard times, Tanya is the first to send money, but always the last to want her name mentioned. For years, she has been a devoted benefactor of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which treats children battling cancer. When asked why she never publicized her involvement, Tanya simply smiled and said, "I've stood in the spotlight long enough. Now I just want to help someone in the dark." A short sentence, but one that captures her essence completely. A star who once blazed bright, now choosing to shine softly in her own quiet way. Her compassion doesn't end there. Tanya has also quietly funded school music programs, particularly in poor southern communities, where children grow up surrounded by hardship just as she once did. To her, music is medicine. She once said, "If one guitar can make a kid put down the bottle, I'll buy 100." In rural schools across the South, Old guitars still hang in classrooms, each one sent by an anonymous donor. Everyone knows they came from Tanya Tucker, but no one ever says it aloud. Perhaps that's because, to her, the point isn't to be known, it's to do what's right, even in silence. In recent years, Tanya has launched a horse rescue project right on her Texas ranch. Under the scorching sun, she takes in abandoned or injured horses, many of which were on the verge of being sold at auction. She names them after her old songs Dream Lover, Strong Enough to Bend, Don't Believe My Heart. When asked why, she explained softly, I used to be like them, worn out, sold short, but I just needed someone to believe I was still worth saving. Though she donates hundreds of thousands of dollars each year, Tanya never calls herself a philanthropist. In one interview, her familiar raspy voice carried a hint of humor. I'm not doing charity. I'm just giving back what life already gave me. The good and the bad. And perhaps that's why everything she does feels so genuine. No spotlight, no audience, no applause, just a woman who once broke apart, now using her healed heart to heal others. As the Texas sun sets, golden light spills across the weathered wooden fences, and Tanya Tucker's story closes like a perfect country ballad. Fame once lifted her up and tore her down, but in the end, what remains isn't magazine covers or million-dollar figures. It's a resilient heart, one that knows how to love, forgive, and live truthfully. Now, at her Austin ranch, surrounded by the soft clatter of hooves and the scent of dew-soaked grass, Delta Dawn is no longer just the song that made her famous. It's a reminder that every life, no matter how scarred, can find its voice again. If this story moved you, share it, like, subscribe, and spread Tanya Tucker's journey so more people can hear it. And tell us in the comments which of her songs stays with you most. The fiery TNT, the soul-stirring While I'm Livin', or the peaceful, sweet Western sound of today? We read every comment, and in the next episode, we'll open the gates to another country legend's ranch, where yet another icon is learning to find peace in their own way.